What is going on, you guys? My name is CodyT503 and this is an Interesting Podcast. Coming to you guys on March 8th, 2024 for episode 88, where today we actually have a very special guest. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Let's get right into this. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is an absolute pleasure to bring to you guys Sledgehammer.
Hey, how's it going, Cody? Thank you for having me.
Oh man, and it is so awesome to actually have you here. Thank you so very much for joining me.
Absolutely.
That is awesome. So let's just start out for maybe all of the people who maybe don't know you. Maybe introduce your name, where you're from, and maybe how long you've been in pro wrestling.
Well, I am Sledgehammer. We are from Oregon. We wrestle out of the Pacific Northwest. I have been involved in wrestling since I believe we started training in June of 2021, I believe, and our debut was in July of 2022. So training for almost 3 years and been wrestling on shows for almost two.
That's really awesome. So before we actually get into, just because you had just brought up about you debuting, your actual time before going to Oregon Pro Wrestling School. And I know that Jack had kind of brought up that you guys kind of had a conversation where it was kind of really leading you into you having that time in which you said, like, okay, I'm ready to get into professional wrestling. So, like, do you kind of remember the exact conversation that you and Jack had? And can you kind of explain how it felt going into Oregon Pro Wrestling School with having that conversation?
Yeah, well, it wasn't any just one singular conversation. It's something we've always talked about since, we were kids. And when my brother did it the first time, he started around 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. And he was really encouraging me to come and join him. But at the time, the wrestling scene, the independent wrestling scene in the area was not great. And so I wasn't really interested in joining him at the time. I was pursuing other career paths and putting all my time and effort into that. And I went to a few of his shows and some of his student shows even. And to be perfectly blunt, I wasn't that impressed. And so I wasn't, not with him, but just with the scene in general. And when the pandemic hit, that was when we had conversations because we were all out of work. And so he said, you know what, let's go hit the gym and start getting into better shape, lifted weights again, and then see about trying to get into wrestling once the pandemic is over, because now the independent scene in the area had been surging. Defy had shown up, Prestige had shown up, POW was brand new, DOA was on the rise again. And so it felt like the best time to get into it. And so we started talking about going to the gym, getting in shape, getting ready, and then trying to find a school. But where my brother had trained the first time through was the WCWC Academy, and that wasn't around anymore. And WCWC was out of business. And so we had to find a new place to train. And we had gotten word that Ricky Gibson was opening a school in Hillsboro. And so they said, go up there, go talk to him, and see about training at Oregon Pro Wrestling School. So we just hopped into a car about a week after they opened or something like that, and hopped into a car, drove up to Hillsboro, met Ricky for the first time, said we were interested in training. So we shook his hand, met him, paid him, and started training that day. So that's really how it all happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, were you kind of like nervous, like kind of like going into Oregon Pro Wrestling School for the first time? Or do you think that because of the fact that your brother had that previous experience, that it kind of made you feel a little bit more better about stepping into such an environment?
Yeah, I was very nervous because I didn't know Ricky. I didn't know anything about how training worked. And to be perfectly honest, I was very nervous because I'm a bigger dude. And I had heard stories of another independent wrestler in the area. His name was Big Jack Cunningham. That when he had first started out trying to break into wrestling, he had gone to his trainer. I forget which school, but he went to the school and he got turned away because the trainer basically refused to train big men. He said he wanted this guy to lose a bunch of weight first before he could come in. So my biggest fear was that I was going to go in there and be turned away, and that they were going to say, you need to, lose weight before we can even take you on as a student. As far as the actual like training goes, I had faith in being able to execute a lot of the moves and stuff. I knew I was going to have to go through training, and there was a lot of moments during training where it was kind of like, man, this is really tough. I don't know how I'm going to be able to figure all this out and put all this together and learn how to do these moves and then put it together in an actual coherent match. Felt like it was going to be rocket science to me until something finally just clicked one day. But I had faith in being able to figure it out because my brother had trained in wrestling before. We'd grown up fans our whole lives, so we knew a little bit about how wrestling worked. Not a lot, which I found out right away that I really didn't know. I thought I did, and I really knew nothing about how wrestling, the guts of it, actually worked. But that was really the only thing I was nervous about, was potentially being turned away. But fortunately, we weren't, because Ricky was a fantastic guy and took us in right away without question. So that was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something I actually wanted to ask you about, was like, how was it working with, Ricky Gibson and Eddie Pearl and Malcolm Flex? And something that Jack had kind of said was that, you know, based off of, your size and everything, they kind of pinpointed things to where like you could actually really value from, doing that regimen of training. And so it's like, how was it like working alongside all of those people, and then knowing like where you can really fit in, or where you can really like how do I say it? Like you can really just express yourself. Like you can really do this thing in pro wrestling, and they kind of guide you toward that. How is that as training goes? There you go.
Well, first of all, I really don't think I could have asked for better trainers in the whole world. Like, I know that there are wrestlers out there, obviously, that you could be trained by that have more notoriety than Ricky and Eddie and Flex. But I really don't think I could have asked for better trainers, because number one, they were, they had a lot of empathy. They were understanding. They were willing to work with me. They understood, hey, a guy who weighs 500 pounds is not going to be doing, flip bumps. And so they understood, there's no point in really working with me on that. Like, they're gonna teach me all the basics, all the shoulder rolls, all the back rolls, all this stuff. But if I struggle with it because I'm just too big, they're not going to, try to make me into something that I'm not. They're going to say, okay, well, maybe you can't do that, but let's work on this. Let's work on your posture in the ring. Let's work on teaching you how to work as a big man. And then also the fact that Ricky and Eddie are the most talented tag team in the area, in my opinion. And so we wanted to be a tag team. So being trained by the best tag team in the area was awesome. And then Flex was excellent because he would really go one-on-one with me, because he's a big man himself, and he would help work with me on how to work as a big man. And so they really helped personalize and tailor the training for me so that I could figure out how to do certain things. So if it was like, hey guys, today we're going to work on doing up and overs, or we're going to work on doing top rope moves. Sledge can't do that. So Sledge, you're going to go over there with Flex, and you're going to work on this other thing that is, more appropriate for a guy your size. And I really appreciated that, because I think even if I could go somewhere with a more prolific trainer, if I went to the Nightmare Academy to go get trained by Cody Rhodes, I'm not so sure that they would do stuff like that. They would probably expect you to be able to do everything that everybody else can do. So being able to have trainers who understood that I would have limitations physically and that I needed to work on other things was awesome. And I think that they were the perfect group of trainers to have.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like with going along with that, like one thing that I had brought up in our last podcast was kind of like them teaching you guys the almost old school way of professional wrestling. Do you feel like there's almost an advantage to having that experience as compared to kind of learning the more modern, quote unquote, day learn like I guess like the most modern day of professional wrestling? Is there an advantage to knowing the old school way of pro wrestling?
I think there's a huge advantage. I am a big advocate for the old school way of wrestling. Like one of the things that, just on a personal level is how big guys wrestle today. Nowadays, it seems to be a trend that big guys don't want to wrestle like big guys. Guys that worked like Yokozuna back in the day. Yokozuna was a big guy who used his weight and was very grounded. You didn't see Yokozuna doing flips off the top rope. Nowadays, big guys, they want to do flips. They want to do all the athletic stuff. You go watch AEW. Keith Lee, he likes to do really athletic stuff. Lance Archer likes to do really athletic stuff. Wardlow likes to do really athletic stuff. So to change things up and have a big guy who actually works like a big guy and tries to use his size to his advantage is really cool. And I also think that working a more old school style, it there's this old saying that when everybody else zigs, you need to zag. So when everyone else is working this modern, quick, athletic style, and we slow things down and do things in a more old school way, it stands out more. And so I think that especially working this old school style, it is the perfect way to engage an audience. And in my opinion, I think it is the superior way to engage an audience, because I think that the modern style of going a million miles a minute is really flashy and it looks cool and it's entertaining. But I don't think that it gets people hooked on what you're doing. I think what gets people hooked is slowing things down and playing to the crowd and getting them emotionally invested in what you're doing. Because one of the proudest matches I've ever had was the DOA Tag Team Championship match against the Flamin' Aces. And that match was just, to me, raw emotion, and it wasn't crazy, athletic stuff. We did some cool things in that match, certainly, but most of it was because the crowd cared about what was happening. The crowd wanted the Hammer Brothers to lose. The crowd wanted the Flamin' Aces to win. And you could hear the reaction at the end of that match when the Flamin' Aces beat us. And to me, that is the essence of what professional wrestling is getting fans invested emotionally in what's about to happen versus just trying to do as much cool stuff as possible to, excite people, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So like before we actually get into like that match, because that is something that I definitely want to get into with you. I just wanted to ask you about like what is your inspirations? Like what superstar do you look up to and you were like, man, if I could have a career like that, if I could portray a character like that, who would you say is your most biggest inspiration as far as your character is concerned?
Well, there's a lot, and it really depends on what portion of my career, my character that you're talking about. Like, I have people who inspire me as far as my promos go. Like, The Rock is the biggest one. He was our favorite wrestler growing up for both me and Jack. Um, as far as like physically, Yokozuna is a big one that I look up to, and the way that he would wrestle and the way that he would protect his size. As far as tag teams go, we have a ton of influences. I'd say the Attitude Era tag teams are the ones who have had the biggest influence on us, namely the Dudleys and Too Cool And then this is a little bit before the Attitude Era, but the Road Warriors obviously are another one that were a big influence on us. So those three are really the ones that I look to the most, because Yokozuna was so good at working as a big man. And the thing that he did that I loved so much was that I would watch matches of his where he wouldn't even bump. He wouldn't even go down until the very last moment of the match. And when he did, the whole crowd would erupt. It was kind of like Hogan slamming Andre sort of a thing. When the huge dude finally goes down on the mat, everybody goes crazy. And so I really took inspiration from Yokozuna in that way. And then as far as character work goes, The Rock, also Stone Cold. Stone Cold is very blue collar, which is very similar to what we do. So promo wise, attitude wise, we try to emulate Rock and Stone Cold the most, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's a question that I had for you. So like how is it like actually being able to work with your brother and him kind of know exactly what you guys both want to bring to the ring and being that connected as compared to like working in a tag team? Because like that has to be like completely different to be working with somebody to whom you're not connected with, but then you also have people like you guys that are actually connected as family members. Like, how does that feel? Like, that has to be insane.
Well, it's awesome because number one, road trips are much easier. Having to go hours and hours driving on the road and having a guy that you really get along with because he's your brother. So we are interested in all the same things, so we can talk and talk for hours and not get bored. When I don't fall asleep, that is, I get very tired as a big man. Sometimes I'll fall asleep and leave him on his own driving. I try not to, but sometimes that will happen. But it's also great having your brother as a tag team partner, because when you are doing something like wrestling, there is so much creativity involved that there's going to be a million ideas being thrown around. And sometimes you don't always agree on things. Sometimes you're just going to really be adamant that this is what we need to do, and the other guy is going to completely disagree and be like, no, we cannot do that, we need to do this. And you're at an impasse. Man, it's much easier to get over that if it's your brother, because it's my brother. I've been fighting with him since we were kids. So if we ever have a fight or an argument or anything like that, we get over it because we've been doing that our whole lives. Whereas if you're in a tag team where it's just a guy that you met in wrestling or a friend of yours, if you get into any kind of a fight, that might be it for you guys. That might be the end of the tag team. Whereas my brother and I can get over it, and we know each other so well that if there ever is a disagreement, we're really good at being able to find a compromise where it's like, hey, maybe we should hit this move in this match. And no, I don't think that's going to work. And we'll say, well, maybe we could do this instead, and that'll kind of accomplish the same thing as the move you wanted to do, and we'll work it out, and we'll reach a compromise. So getting to tag with my brother is the absolute best thing I could have asked for, and it means that he gets to take all the punishment, and then I get to come in and clean and beat everybody up and get all the glory. So, thank you to my brother Jack for being the punching bag who always gets beat up. And then I'm the one who gets to come in and clean house and get cheers. And it's great. So thank you to him.
Oh man, that is so awesome. Yeah, well, one thing I wanted to actually ask you about, because like that was definitely another thing that I wanted to bring up with you later on, is actually having Jackhammer as like a little crash test dummy. So that would be definitely something we'll have to get into. But it's like, how is it like kind of like coordinating with him? And like, not every match that a professional wrestler has is going to be the greatest.
Right.
But you actually have somebody to where you can actually go through those long car drives, and you actually have somebody that you can actually talk to and actually go throughout the match and know exactly what each person could have done, or maybe I should have done this better. How is it like actually sitting next to somebody who can actually understand exactly where you're coming from when you're explaining those details in that match in which you're like, I could have done this better? Like, that has to build a connection even more than a regular tag team could.
Yeah, I mean it's it's excellent because Jack also has an amazing mind for the business, and so getting to kind of pick his brain and ask him, well, what did you think about this? Did this go well? And I will say Jack is very he's his own worst critic. He is very hard on himself. So I think we kind of balance ourselves out because you know, we'll get done with a match and he'll say, man, that match stunk. And, you know, I'll have to tell him, well, you know, hey, there was this happened and this happened and this happened and all that was great. So there's always something positive to take away from even the worst matches that you have. So yeah, getting to and it's one of the benefits of being in a tag team too. Like if you were just by yourself, and most people I would say carpool, they, you know, they get a group of people in a car together to go to shows. Very rarely do I think a person just drives by themselves. But even still, if you're in a carpool and you're in a car with a bunch of people that you don't know that well, you're probably not going to be willing to discuss your match as much and how it went. Because number one, not they're not all watching your matches. You know, if you're working at POW and you're in uh a car with Funny Bone and driving him home or driving him to the airport or whatever it is you're doing, you probably can't pick Funny Bone's brain on what he thought about your match because he's not watching your match because he's got 15 pounds of makeup to put on. So he's in the back busy doing his own stuff. He's not at the monitor watching what's going on. Whereas I'm with Jack, he's in the match. So of course he knows what's going on. So we could talk about what happened. So yeah, having a tag team partner is awesome. Driving back and forth with him, getting to talk about how the match went and you know, criticizing ourselves and trying to figure out how to get better. It makes us better wrestlers. And then also having it be your brother makes you more comfortable to talk about everything where, you know, certain topics that you might not want to bring up because you're embarrassed about it. Like if you say, man, I was blown up out there. I got tired. I was winded. You may not want to bring that up to somebody and be like, that guy's cardio is not the best. You're comfortable bringing that up with your brother because he knows and you know each other. And my brother would never admit, boy, I was dying out there. I was huffing and puffing. He'd never admit that to somebody else, but he'll say it to me when it happens because I'm his brother and we can be open and honest with each other. So that's awesome. And yeah, having your brother there in a tag team makes reviewing and talking about your matches that much easier and that much better and makes you a much better wrestler.
Yeah. Yeah, I know when I was actually talking with Jack, we were talking about how you guys were kind of wrestling on the trampoline together, and that's what
Mhm.
really kind of brought you guys together as far as that chemistry goes. And then he also brought up that like when you're wrestling with your brother, you're going to be able to be a little bit more aggressive with them than you would necessarily
Mhm.
anybody else. So it's like, how is it for you to come up with a move and know that like if I bring up this move up to Jack, he'll allow me to try and execute it the best way that I can. But it would be way different if I were to bring this up to another competitor who didn't have that connection with me because you can't be as hard on them as you can your brother. So it's like, how is that for you as a professional wrestler and trying to just come up with whatever you can in a match?
Well, it's awesome, especially in training because my signature move, the excavator, it's very scary taking that move because I'm a huge guy and your body's being swung around and twisted around. And if you land wrong, you can get seriously hurt. And so when I bring stuff like that up, a lot of times I get looks from people where they're just like, I'm not taking that. And my brother in training, when we were like, hey, we got this idea for this excavator move, he's the first guy to be like, all right, let's get in the ring. Let's do it. You can do it to me. And he's, he has that trust in me and is willing to do those sorts of things. And he's also a great training partner. Just recently we had a seminar with Gabe Sapolsky, who works for WWE. And, we had to partner up and do practice matches for him. And the first guy that I picked was my brother. And I was like, let's get in there because we know that we're comfortable with each other. We know that all of our stuff is going to look really good because we are not worried about hurting one another. We know what our limits are. We know that we could be a little stiff with each other. We could throw punches and lay him in there a little bit more and really hit the guy. And it's fine because we understand as brothers, we're both tough. We both trust each other to not knock someone's eye out or something. And
Yeah.
trust is such a big thing in professional wrestling. And there's nobody I trust more than my brother. So being able to work with him, train with him, and know that he's going to have that trust in me is huge because I'm sure it's happened, but I can't think of too many times where we've really brought up anything and my brother has really like questioned it and been like, I'm not so sure you can do that. He'll always, have faith that I understand my own limitations and won't overreach and try to do too much. So yeah, definitely having your brother there and having that trust in him is a huge advantage.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to talk about like the boom lift because I know that like he had said that like that was something that you guys were kind of working on, but you guys maybe didn't understand exactly how to execute it perfectly. And was like the boom lift where like Jack would go up to the top rope and then he would kind of like climb onto your shoulders and then you would hold them up and then walk him forward and then he would slam down onto the opponent kind of like a body slam. Like what exactly is like the boom lift that you guys were thinking about executing?
Well, the original boom lift was going to be that we both lift our opponent up, where I was going to get the front part of his body, Jack would get his legs, and then we would both press him up into the air as high as we could. And then he would just
Mhm.
free fall down to the mat. So no, there was a ton of issues with it. It sounds really cool, but it's number one, it's quite dangerous because you're just throwing somebody up in the air as high as you can, and you have no idea how that person's going to land, if they even know how to land, if they're going to just rotate and fall on their heads. Sometimes we work venues where the ceiling is really low, so there's an issue with, oh, are we going to hit the ceiling if we throw this guy too high? And then also when we practiced it in training, we realized it's just way too difficult to get people up in that move. Anyone who is heavy at all, they're not going to get up very high, and then it's not going to look very good. And so much of it relies on the person who's taking it to be really good at taking that move and being really athletic and having the ability to post and push off your shoulders and get as high as possible. And so we decided the boom lift, it's just not going to work. Like, it's a cool idea. Me personally, like, Jack was really into the boom lift. I was never a huge fan of it. I love the finishing move that we've settled on now, which is the diesel hammer. Um, that move is great too, because I'm strong enough, big enough that we could do it to almost anybody. We did it to Dr. Cleaver. Dr. Cleaver is almost 300 pounds. So being able to do that move to him is awesome. And it's really devastating. Like, it's such a cool move. Like, it's a pile driver. It's named after the diesel hammer pile driver, which is a real construction pile driver. That's the most powerful pile driver in the world. So it just makes sense. Whereas boom lift, it's kind of like, yeah, we're construction workers, but is the boom lift really like a scary piece of construction equipment? It's kind of just something that lifts you up in the air, you know. Like I get we're lifting our opponent up in the air, but a boom lift doesn't sound that intimidating. And yeah, we worked on it in training and just realized that you know, trying to toss someone in the air as high as we could wasn't really going to work on multiple levels. So we wound up pivoting to what we have today.
Yeah. Yeah. So like what was because like it's been kind of brought up a little bit during our conversation about you guys kind of like growing up and wrestling against each other. So like what is like one most memorable moment that you have with Jackhammer when you guys were growing up and like wrestling each other that maybe you can share with us here today?
Well, we had a lot of different things. I think the most memorable was when we made like a compilation video of all of our best hits. We called it Championship Trampoline Wrestling. And we would we made a whole highlight video with all of our moves, and we had friends who would come over and we put their highlights in it. And that was just a lot of fun putting that together and making all the highlights, putting all the music on it and everything. And as far as like stuff that we actually did on the trampoline, it was there were lots of funny moments. There was stuff like we would instead of using tables, we'd use cardboard boxes and throw people through them, stuff like that. And we would use styrofoam as a weapon. And there was one time where my brother hit me with like a spinning heel kick. And this is probably the most memorable single move is he hit me with a spinning heel kick. And he legitimately knocked me out for a second. And so I kind of, stumbled back and collapsed. And I was much smaller back then. So him and I could wrestle one-on-one, and it would be a little more competitive and believable. But he really nailed me with that spinning heel kick. And that was probably the most memorable thing we did, especially because at the time, one of his friends had come over and was going to hang out with him, and he saw us wrestling on the trampoline, and he wasn't a wrestling fan. So he was like, "What are you guys doing?" And then he sees me get kicked in the head and get knocked out. He's like, "God, you guys are idiots." And so that was pretty funny. And that's probably the single move that sticks out to me the most.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, I know when I was actually interviewing him, I had asked him if you guys would, hit like a rock bottom or all of that. So it's like, was there any like special move that you love to like hit on him because you had the ability to at that time?
Oh, we hit everything. We hit all of our favorite wrestlers' moves. Like we would hit the rock bottom, we'd hit the stunner, the RKO was a big one. We had our own finishing moves at the time. Uh, I think my finishing move at the time was the H bomb, I called it. So like the hammer bomb, and it was like a kind of like a sit out spine buster, basically. And then my brother had the ham bone suplex, I think he called it, instead of the T-bone suplex. So it was Shelton Benjamin's T-bone suplex, but he called it the ham bone suplex. And yeah, we would hit all that stuff. We'd hit RKOs, stunners, everything. I really loved doing the angle slam. That was one of my favorite moves to do because I was a little more athletic back then, so I could hit it and then kind of pop up backwards and land on top of the guy right into a pin. So that was always fun. The choke slam was a classic, especially on a trampoline because you just grab the guy and then he jumps as high as he can, and it looks really cool. So yeah, back then we didn't understand wrestling psychology as much. We thought it was just hitting everyone's finishing move back and forth over and over again. So that was really all we did on the trampoline, but it was a lot of fun. And we every finishing move of every attitude and ruthless aggression era wrestler you could think of, we were doing every single one of them on the trampoline back then.
That is so awesome. So it's like, how does it feel to back then, like wanting to be a tag team in professional wrestling, and then now both of you guys win a tag team championship together, and both of you guys share that moment as far as you guys' first tag team championships. Like, what was running through your mind when you were like, we've actually accomplished what we wanted to do?
I have to be honest, we never really got the opportunity to take that in and understand, like, man, we just won tag team championships. Like, this is really cool, because
Mhm.
in both instances, other things were kind of going on that distracted from the moment. Where when we won the DOA tag team championships, uh, we kind of won those in a cowardly, like, scummy way, where one guy was knocked out and Jack crawled in the ring and covered him. So it wasn't like this big grand coronation of like, oh man, the Hammer Brothers have reached the top of the mountain. It was more like those Weasley Hammer Brothers like barely squeaked by and won those titles. So we didn't really have the chance to enjoy that as much. And then also same with the POW Tag Team Championship. When we initially won those was at Baseball at PK Park in Eugene, and the ending of that match got screwed up. And so I had no time to think about. All I could think about in the aftermath of that match was how angry I was that the that the end of the match got messed up. And so I really didn't have any time to like let it settle in. Like, man, we just won the tag titles in front of, like, I think there was like 1,000 fans there because it was at a baseball park. I was too and it was in the main event, which was awesome. I was too frustrated over what happened in the match. And to be honest, I think that's true of almost every match we have. Very rarely do I get to savor any victories or championship wins or anything like that, because as soon as I walk through the curtain, I'm thinking about, okay, what went well, what didn't go well, and what can I do better next time? That's the first thing that's going through my head, as opposed to, enjoying what just happened. But being able to look back on it in hindsight, once everything calms down and you're not thinking about the match, it is very, very cool that so many people have put faith in us as an act, as characters, to put us at the top of their company basically that quickly, especially at DOA. DOA, I remember we were working POW and hadn't worked DOA yet. We really wanted to. And then when we finally did get to work there, we were like, it's probably going to be a while until, we get an opportunity to start wrestling for the tag team titles. And I think it was not very many months after we debuted until we just won them out of nowhere. And that was kind of crazy, to have people coming up to us and telling us like, man, you won the tag team championships, and knowing that people just have faith in our abilities and are willing to put us in that position so early, and telling us like, hey, you guys really understand, how to play characters, be entertaining, and so we're gonna have you win the tag team titles. And that's a huge acknowledgement from the people in power who make all those decisions. And looking back on it now, it's awesome that we were given that opportunity, and that those people had that kind of faith in us, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like, whenever you kind of look back at when you were growing up and you were just talking with Jack about everything that you guys wanted to do in pro wrestling, is it really crazy to now look at those people that are in charge or fans that are willing to put you on that pedestal? Like, they're willing to give you guys the tag team championships. You guys can be a tag team. You guys are a tag team that people want to come and see, and they'll buy your guys' merchandise or get invested in everything that you guys have going on for you. Like, that has to be insane to take a step back on and just look in the absolute just retrospect of it all. Like, that has to be insane.
Yeah, it is really cool. And, you know, I remember growing up and I knew some of the local guys. I mean, I didn't, there's only one guy that I really knew, and that was Thunder. Chris. He was the best friend of my aunt when I was in high school. And so she connected me with him, and I would message him way back in the day on MySpace when that was a thing. And he would keep up with me and ask me how I was doing and if I was playing college football and all these different things. And so then to work at these companies that he worked at was pretty cool. And then getting to see some of the guys that I knew growing up from the area. And I wasn't a huge uh fan of the indie scene around here. I watched WWF, and that was all I really did. But I did go to a couple of shows because of that connection to Thunder. And so getting to share a locker room with guys like Big Ugly, who I grew up watching and really respected, was really cool. And then getting to be complimented by guys who've gone through the business and have reached some incredible heights, like Drexel. Drexel's had faith in us from day one. Drexel's really been a big fan of us, and that's an awesome feeling because Drexel is somebody who puts a lot of emphasis into his own character work. And so when a guy like that comes up to you and says, "Hey, Hammer Brothers, I think you guys really understand the business, and you guys are years ahead of where you should be right now, and you understand, and you're paying us all these compliments," that's crazy. And it's really cool to hear that sort of thing. And one thing I will say is that the work's not finished. Like, as crazy as it is that all this is going on, and we're winning tag team championships, we're main eventing shows, we're working alongside these guys that we grew up watching and really respect, we still have aspirations even further beyond where we are right now. Like, we'd really like to start regularly working for Prestige. We'd really like to start regularly working for Defy. We've wrestled for both companies before, but we'd like to get to the point where we are being asked to wrestle for those companies, every month. That's the goal right now. But even that is not where we want to finish. Like, we want to be on TV someday. We would like to go wrestle for, like an Impact or an AEW, maybe even a WWE. I don't know. It's pretty unlikely. But it would be awesome to be able to get the opportunity to be on TV, because we have faith in our characters and think that if the Hammer Brothers were given an opportunity to be on television, that people would really like what we do. And so even though we really appreciate and are blown away by all we've accomplished up to this point and all the people we've gotten to work with, we still have more work to do, and we want to get even further than we are right now, and hopefully we can make some of that happen in this upcoming year.
Yeah. So here's a good question for you. So when you had actually lost the titles to the Flamin' Aces, do you feel, because I had kind of brought this up with Jack, do you feel like they were in such a good point, and you guys were also at such a good point, that it actually benefited them based off of your guys' run to win the tag team titles, and then have that actually be like a like it's beneficial toward that tag team? Like, how does that feel as a pro wrestler?
Well, it feels awesome because that's the goal, especially when you're a heel, when you're a bad guy. What is your job as a heel? It's to make sure that the babyface, the good guy, gets over, that they're popular, that the crowd is cheering for them. If they're not, if they're cheering for you instead, then you're not doing your job right. It's that simple. Like, so being able to work with the Flaming Aces is awesome because they're our rivals, they're our arch nemesis, whatever you want to call them. We have wrestled them as a team more times than anyone else by far. I think like we've wrestled them over 10 times now, and the most we've ever wrestled any other team is probably 4 or 5 times at most. So they are definitely our rivals, and getting to work with them is awesome, first of all, because we have an immense amount of trust in them, kind of similar to what I have with my brother. There's very few guys that we trust as much as those two. And being able to work with them and hear that reaction from the crowd is an incredible feeling, because the second the ref's hand comes down for 3 and you hear the crowd just explode, you almost smile, because you're like, that's exactly what we wanted. That's exactly what we were going for. And we take a lot of pride in being able to be bad guys, be heels that amplify the popularity of whoever we're wrestling. So even when we beat the Flamin' Aces in our most recent match we had with them, we were in the locker room listening for their entrance when they came out for their match the next month when they weren't wrestling us. And we were like, if the crowd really reacts to them, then we know that we've done a great job, because we know that even though they're not wrestling for the tag team championships tonight, if they're still over, if they're still really popular with the crowd, then we know we did a good job. And sure enough, they were really over. And even not just the Flaming Aces, but we just wrestled the Co-op, and you would have thought that they were the most popular act on the whole card that night. And I, not to give ourselves credit for it, but we're like, then we must be doing something right as bad guys if the whole crowd is going nuts for these dudes, like they're the top baby faces in the whole company. So yeah, getting to work with the Flaming Aces and hearing that reaction when they won the tag titles was awesome, and told us that we're doing something right, and also give them a ton of credit too. I don't want to be like, oh, the only reason they were popular is because we're so great. The Flaming Aces are awesome too. They are popular because they did an excellent job and had an awesome match with us. And I remember going into that match, that match for the tag titles, that first one we had, won DOA match of the year. And even if it sounds arrogant or confident, it was the match of the year, in my opinion. I watched every other match, and I really believe that was the best match at DOA that year. And going into that match, I remember I had heard from other people were coming up to us, and they said it right in front of the Flaming Aces too, where they were telling us like, hey, the Flaming Aces didn't have a great match last week or whatever it was. And they're like, so Hammer Brothers, you go out there and make sure that they have a great match. And, if they screw up, let me know. That's what they were saying to us. And the Flaming Aces, they killed it. They did an awesome job. There was no moment where I was like, man, they really screwed that up. They were fantastic. They stepped up, and they really had a career performance. And they just, I know, just based on what other people say about them, that there is a comfort level not only that we have with them, but what they have with us, to where they are willing to throw punches, throw kicks, and make a little more contact than they would with other people. They're really going to lay that in there. I mean, I got marks on my head from Spencer Scott to prove it. Like he'll throw those kicks in there and nail me. And that's what I want, because I want it to look good. I want it to look like we're really battling for these tag team championships, because it puts more value on the tag team championships. It gets the crowd excited. And the Flaming Aces just did an amazing job that night, and have ever since we wrestled that night. And we love working with them. And it's just been fantastic getting to wrestle our rivals, essentially.
That is so awesome. So, like, can you kind of like walk us through the whole experience of you like accidentally dumping hot sauce into your eyes before you were actually supposed to be tagged in?
Oh yeah, that was at the Hot Sauce Festival in Portland. Oregon Pro Wrestling School does a show there every summer, and it was, boy, I guess it would have been like my second time wrestling ever. It would have been right after my debut at POW, I think. And we went there, and we had this idea where they were like, hey, you know what, Sledge, when you get tagged in at the end, and it's time for you to come in and start beating down the midnight heat. How about you psych yourself up by going to one of the vendors, getting a bottle of hot sauce, and just pouring it all over your face and going nuts? And I was like, well, first of all, I'm not going to do that with real hot sauce because that's going to blind me. And so my brother Jack goes, okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll go buy a bottle of hot sauce, have him hold on to it until it's time for you to go grab it and dump it all over you. And I'll pour all the hot sauce out and then just put, water in it or something. And I was like, all right, that sounds good. But Jack, he claims he didn't do it on purpose. I'm not so sure. I think he might have done it on purpose. But he went and he did pour it out, but in all of his infinite wisdom, he didn't rinse it out. So when he poured it out, there was still a ton of like hot sauce in the bottle. So when he put water in it, it was just, it was watered down hot sauce, but it was still very hot sauce. So when I poured it all over myself, it blinded me essentially. It messed me up because it was not a mild bottle of hot sauce either. It was extremely hot sauce, and there was still a ton of hot sauce in it mixed in with water. And so when I got it all over, I couldn't see. Somebody has a clip of it, but I don't know where it is now. But I get in and I'm immediately wiping my eyes. I'm hitting them and then having to wipe my eyes because I can't see. I can't breathe because I've got hot sauce in my nose, in my mouth. And it was so bad that even the guys we wrestled that day, Ricky and Eddie, our trainers, them just being near me while I was hitting them, they were like, I couldn't breathe or see either because it was so hot, that hot sauce, that even like smelling it was messing them up. So you can imagine how I felt pouring it into my eyes and nose and mouth. And so I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe. And I just remember it was really funny. The clip was really funny, but then after we won, or actually I think we lost that match, but I was rolling out of the ring, and Jack, I just remember saying to Jack, like, oh, I hate you so much, I can't see. And I was in so much pain. And then I spent like the next hour or two in the tent where all the wrestlers were sitting, just pouring water into my eyes and on my face. And we had friends there that wanted to see us. And I was like, I can't see them right now. I'm in so much pain. I have like, I'm pouring water all over and it's not helping. It was very funny. Maybe, and Ricky, who has been in the business for, I don't even know, like 17, 18 years, something like that. He said it's the funniest thing he's ever seen. So that's a huge mark for us. If a guy who's been around that long said that's the funniest thing he's ever seen in a match, that's a huge accomplishment. That's up there with winning tag team championships for sure.
That is so awesome. I know one thing I had actually asked Jack the last time that we had talked was, what could we actually expect if you and Jack were to be in a destruction zone match? What exactly would you do to him in that kind of circumstance?
Well, if I was wrestling Jack, first of all, he's very tough, so it'd be really hard to take him out. So I'd have to, we'd have to bring in a lot of the stuff that we brought in our destruction zone match against Konami Code. We'd have to bring out the concrete. We'd have to bring out the sawhorse table. And I think, if I were to do anything, I'd probably have to give him my big excavator, probably through a table. That'd probably be the best way to take care of him. I'd probably put some nuts and bolts on top of that table like we did last time, and then give him the big old excavator right through the table. He probably isn't going to kick out of that. So that's probably what I'd have to do. Maybe use the old sledgehammer on him. Probably not kicking out of that either. So yeah, you know, bringing all the normal construction equipment and tools and all this stuff that we usually would, and you know, just using my size because he's not going to be able to pick me up, so he's not going to slam me through anything. So that's probably what I would do if I was ever in a destruction zone match with Jack. But I don't intend on wrestling him at least anytime soon because you know we're trying to work on our tag team synergy and keep things cool between us. But if I did wrestle him, obviously I'd win. You know.
Awesome. So like I know the last time that I had shared a clip about an interview with Spencer Scott, and he was kind of warning you guys about what to expect in your guys' match. So, what would you say in response to Spencer Scott about what to expect if he ever tried to come with Zay in between you and Jack and the tag team titles? What warning would you give him?
Well, I would tell him, you know, we've already beaten him up so many times I've lost count. At this point, you know, we're probably rent free in his head. We don't, he thinks about us every night. He thinks about our titles every night. We don't think about him at all. You know, we move on. You know, we're basically prize fighters. Why are we here? Why are we in DOA? Because we get paid to be here. It's not because, you know, we're here because we have all these, you know, dreams of being big stars. It's because we want to get paid money. So we don't think about Spencer Scott. We don't think about Zay Perez at all, even though they toss and turn and dream about us every single night. And I would say that, you know, if Spencer Scott or Zay Perez were to call us out, that they got to be careful what they wish for because we already beat them. We already pushed them to the side. They're not wrestling us for the titles anymore. We got rid of them. We won. That's over. It's done with. So if we ever see them further down the road, we might just have to take care of them for good. We might just have to get them not just out of the tag title picture, but out of the DOA altogether. We might just have to end their careers. So if that's the case, we might just have to put them in a destruction zone match, and then that'll be it because we'll never lose a destruction zone match. It's our match. And I would say that if we ever were to give them another tag title shot, which we probably won't, but we're such great guys that maybe we're feeling generous. Maybe it's around Christmas time and we feel like handing out gifts. Maybe we'll say, hey, you know what? Flamin' Aces, how about we have a little destruction zone match for the tag titles? And if you guys lose, you give up your careers. You could go back to whatever it is you were doing before you became wrestlers, cleaning toilets, making coffees for soccer moms, or whatever it is they do in their free time. You know, but their time wrestling will be over. But we've moved on from them. We're busy in DOA with the co-op right now, and we're gonna lay waste to them and then move on to whatever other jabroni tag team is next. And we'll probably keep the DOA tag team titles forever until we get signed somewhere huge. You know, when we get signed to AEW, we'll probably have to vacate them or whatever. But until that happens, we're going to keep the DOA tag titles forever, essentially, indefinitely, we'll say.
That is awesome. So, as like one final question that I have for you, like how much does it mean to you to have had this dream with your brother where you both wanted to be in pro wrestling and now both of you are actually competing at a level in which maybe you guys both didn't expect you both to actually achieve? Like, how much does that mean to you?
It means a lot, and it is pretty surreal because when you watch these wrestling shows, that was another thing I was going to mention earlier when you talked about like us getting into wrestling and me not joining my brother the first time around. Another reason for that is because I have such an immense amount of respect for professional wrestling, and I remember thinking about doing it even before my brother started, and choosing not to because I had so much respect for wrestling that I thought to myself, I don't even think I could do that. Those guys are so talented. I don't think I have what it takes to be able to do what those guys do, even on an independent level. So it is pretty surreal and cool to be able to do this and live our dreams, and to really be able to have this sort of legacy in the area that we could share with our families. That, you know, my brother Jack has a son. He will be able to grow up and eventually see these videos of his dad and his uncle wrestling and saying, man, they were the Hammer Brothers. That's really cool. Uh, so, you know, being guys that he can look up to is something really, really cool and really important to us. And it is just crazy to take a step back and see just how far we've gotten, and now how the independent scene in the Northwest is just exploding, and how we're getting 450 fans a night at DOA. And we've gotten so many of them that now we have to move to a new and bigger venue. And that's just crazy to think about, because even discussing getting into wrestling the first time when my brother was wrestling in like 2016, crowds back then were probably 50 to 100 people tops. And so now we're talking about, you know, DOA is generally considered kind of a step below Defy and Prestige in terms of the talent they bring in and stuff like that. Like Defy's bringing in John Moxley and Eddie Kingston. Prestige just announced Minoru Suzuki from New Japan. They've got Zack Sabre Jr. coming in. They got all these huge names. DOA doesn't bring in big names like that, and they're still getting 450 fans a night off the backs of local talent only. And that's crazy to think about, that we get to be a part of that and get to have so many fans that are paying money to see all of us perform. It's just, it's nuts sometimes when you really step back and think about the way that independent wrestling has grown in the area, and that we get to be a part of that. It is really, really special and really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you so much for actually joining me here tonight, where I can actually just sit apart and just pick apart your mind for a little bit. Like, it has been an absolute pleasure to sit down and actually talk with you.
Yes, absolutely. It's been fantastic being here. Thank you for having me, Cody. It was great. Awesome questions as always. I've watched you know, your past interviews with Jack and with Spencer. I believe I watched one with Amira, and you always do a great job. So thank you so much for having me and asking such great questions.
I really, really appreciate that. And I cannot wait to see you in April when you actually return to Independence.
Yes, it's going to be great. The Independence show is going to be awesome. It's running the same night as Prestige in Roseland. So being able to, and who knows, there might be, you know, we just had Jordan Cruz come in and attack Jaden in our house at DOA. So who knows, there might be a DOA versus Prestige type thing down the line. I think that would be really cool. I'd love to wrestle some of those punks in Prestige. And we've wrestled for Prestige before multiple times. But I think DOA is kind of our home, and it's going to be great to be in Independence and get to see that crowd again. And the Independence crowd loves us. They love us when we go out there and we take our lunch breaks and we cheat and fight dirty. I think they love it when we do that, and they really cheer us every time we do. So it'll be great to see you in Independence and see all the other fans who will be there.
All right. So before we actually close everything out, where can everybody who maybe doesn't follow you, where can they actually find you on social media?
On social media, I believe we are at Jack and Sledge on all socials. It's Jack and Sledge on Twitter, Jack and Sledge on Instagram. You could search up Jack and Sledge, the Hammer Brothers on Facebook, Jack and Sledge on TikTok, YouTube, every single social media platform we're on there. And I'm kind of the social media guy. So anytime you see a video or anything posted, it's usually me. And I try to post something new every single day across all platforms, whether it's a clip or a photo or whatever it is. So you'll constantly have a stream of Hammer Brothers updates. So that's where you can find us on social media.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a very, very good night, and I cannot wait to catch you a little bit later.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody, for having me. You have a great night as well.
Well, all right, you guys. So that was Interesting's podcast interview with Sledgehammer. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. Make sure to go and follow me on social media at CodyT503. That's Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And remember, March 12th at 6 p.m., Interesting Podcast is going to have the return of Caden Cassidy. This is going to be another interview you guys are not going to want to miss. So make sure you guys ring that notification bell so you guys get notified whenever I upload content. I'll catch you guys later. Have a good night.